Hey folks, this clip is brought to you by the fastest growing sports book in Tennessee, Zen Sports. Enter code A to Z TN, ATOZ TN to earn a welcome bonus that gives you 5% cash back on your total betting volume for your first 15 days of betting. That is Zen Sports. Now on to Joe Milton. So I rewatched the entire game and really paid attention and actually took notes on what Joe Milton did. And I saw a lot of people breaking down his throws like the freaking Zapruder film to try to see if he was the problem, if the wide receivers were the problem, the offensive line was the problem, if whatever it may be. And the conclusion that I came to is that it was kind of all three. Joe came out and threw some not so great passes that were behind guys. And at the same time, you watch them, and they probably should have still been caught. I said it before. I mean, these are SEC receivers. He's still like the one to McAllen Castles. I mean, yeah, it's back here, but you're an SEC receiver. You need to catch that ball. The one to Dante Thornton, it was a beautiful pass from Joe Milton. There's no excuse. And some other ones where it was just a little bit of both. And then you get to the offensive line. They certainly weren't perfect, and they let a little more pressure in than they should have, especially against Austin Peay. That's kind of crazy that
Some of the, I mean, it wasn't just the offensive line. Jabari Small kind of had a couple of tough moments in pass protection as well.
Exactly. So, I mean, it wasn't great kind of all the way around. Just everybody was off, and you could tell that Heupel kind of just packed it in and said, we're just going to do simple side-to-side stuff, easy screens, and yada, yada. I mean, thinking of Jabari Small, there was actually a great screen that Milton threw. I believe it was a third down, and he threw it to Jabari Small, and it was perfect. Joe executed it perfectly, backed up. They let the defensive line come up. He throws the pass right into Jabari's hands, and he drops it. And then when you look at it, Jabari would have either torn off a giant chunk of yardage or maybe even scored a touchdown. I mean, it was tons of green grass in front of him. And there were just moments like that throughout this entire game where you look, Keaton, fumble, and you look and you go, I mean, if you score a touchdown there, you're thinking at least a little differently about the outcome of this game if it's 37-13. And then if you get another one, maybe Jabari Small does, crack that all the way into the end zone. And you're thinking about that, I think, considerably differently at that point. And so there were just moments like that where everybody was off, but everybody wants to know about Joe Milton. And can he be the guy that takes Tennessee to a win in the Swamp for the first time in 20 years? I will put it this way to just start off. Does Joe Milton have the ability to do that? Yes. I think without a doubt he does. And this team as a whole does. Because I don't think Florida's great. Can they actually do it after what we've seen? And can he be the guy to do that? That's where it starts to get a little dicey. I don't know where you land on that, Zach.
I mean, this is the first time that we're going to see Joe Milton in a real pressure situation. Like Vanderbilt last year had a little bit of that, just coming off that South Carolina win. They had to go out there and win 56-0 to really erase any of those questions that were floating around about the locker room. And he was good there. The Orange Bowl was, I don't know if that was really kind of like his audition in a way. I think he already kind of had that locked in as the next guy, or at least he was going to get that chance. You want to win that game, and you respect the way Tennessee came out and played in that game, but it's not the same as this game against Florida with the history, the fact that it's on the road, you haven't won there in 20 years, and the fact that, like we mentioned earlier, it really is going to define your entire season. If you lose this game, suddenly all your goals become a lot less attainable. So I think, how does he handle that pressure? How does he handle the crowd noise? He hasn't really been, again, in one of those real situations where the crowd is just disrupting timing, communication, all those things that happened last season in Athens. And Hendon Hooker had started in the Swamp in 2021. He had started some of these crazy road games at Alabama, even in 2021. And Milton played in some of those games, but it was when the outcome was no longer in doubt. So he didn't really get that same pressure feeling. It's like, well, Tennessee's already lost this game. Let's go out there and make a few plays. There's really no pressure on you at that point. It's a much different situation. All that said, Hooker had that experience and still struggled in Athens last season. Still issues with that atmosphere. So how is Milton going to handle, his first true kind of road start in a hostile environment in a must-win game, pretty much, that's almost as much of a concern for me as some of the accuracy issues and touch issues that we've seen pop up over these first couple of games. I really don't know what to expect. I mean, there's really no way to go out and predict what's going to happen because we really don't know who Florida is either. I mean, you can look at that Utah game and talk about how beatable they look, but if Tennessee plays the way they did against Austin P, they would have played Utah. I mean, the game would have looked the same, if not worse, and you'd have those same questions about Tennessee.
Yep.
I really don't know where Florida is as a team just yet through these first 2 games of the season, and I don't know where Tennessee is either. I think we're going to learn a ton about both of these teams this weekend. And I think that's really how you have to view this game.
Here's a tough truth from this. There's a couple of comments kind of in the same vein. Elias says, if you lose this game, the volume is going to be deafening for Nico. We all knew this going in. And then Vols Deep podcast asks, how long is the leash? And that's the entire question. If he comes out with another slow start, is the tolerance so small that it would be in the Florida game where they go, no, we got to win this thing. And so they yank him and try Nico. I wouldn't love to see that because I think you look back at the history of Tennessee football and guys that had their first major game ever in Swamp, that didn't turn out so hot, Nathan Peterman. So maybe not that I think Nico is Nathan Peterman. I think Nico is a far more talented quarterback. At least it seems so far. No offense, Nathan Peterman. But he just seems, you hear anybody talk about the kid and it's just glowing reviews all the time. I think he will be great long term. But regardless, sorry, there's somebody out my front window I just saw. But regardless, it is a live show. There's proof.
Is it Butch Jones? Seeing if we're still talking about him.
It is. Butch is just out in the street staring at me. It's football season, and it's time to switch to Zen Sports, the fastest-growing sportsbook in Tennessee, changing the bonus game with their cash rewards program. When you sign up for Zen Sports with code A2ZTN, ATOZTN, earn a welcome bonus that gives you 5% cash back on your total betting volume for your first 15 days of betting. And if you have friends who bet on sports, share your Zen Sports referral bonus code with them, and you will earn 3% of their betting volume for their first 6 months of betting on Zen Sports with no cap on how much you can earn. So what are you waiting for? Stop wasting time and money on other sportsbooks when you could be earning real cash rewards with Zen Sports. Download today on the App Store at ZenSports.com. And your wallet will thank you later. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. That is Zen Sports. Go download it now. Anywho, I think that it will be the entire Florida game. You get that if you're Joe Milton, at least. If it's a total disaster, like flying off the rails, 4 interceptions, like Nathan Peterman. Yeah, maybe they yank him in that game because you got to do just what you got to do. But I think in reality, you at least get that Florida game. And if it's pretty bad, if it's mediocre, I think he stays. Because honestly, I think there's a scenario where Joe Milton is mediocre and Tennessee still beats Florida. In this, just from what we've seen from Florida, maybe what we've seen of Florida is wrong. But I think there's a scenario where he's mediocre and he still win. And then I think if he's good, obviously he keeps his job. But I think it's at least the entirety of that game. Do you agree with that? I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, no. Elias and Jason both made comments here where Elias says if you do put Nico in, Joe is probably done, a la Ainge in 2005. Jason here, if we go to Nico, then there's no going back. We have to let Milton play and show what he's got. I think Heupel is in a pretty tough spot. I think he knows that Nico's the better quarterback. I think we all know that. I don't know if he's the better quarterback right now because of the experience factor and everything that goes into running this offense. And we can't know that until they actually play. But with everything the last 2 years between Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton and the way that Joe Milton handled that and the story that it's become, what happens if you take him out? If Florida gets up 13-0 or 14-0 or 10-0, and Tennessee can't get anything going on offense, and you take him out and you bring Nico in, and Nico can't get anything going on offense either. What if everything's just kind of still off? Well, then it's a huge mess. Then you got all these questions. What happens going into this UTSA game? Another game, by the way, that has the potential to be like that Austin Peay game, because UTSA is a pretty decent team. It's just that it's going to be a tough situation to manage, and you don't want to just like punt on this season. And that we're getting ahead of ourselves. I mean, that's worst case scenario. Joe Milton just cannot get anything going. It just becomes a disaster. Maybe it gets so bad you make that move. But if it's going to be 9-4, it might just be 9-4, and next year's the year they make the run with Nico as a sophomore. I mean, I think Tennessee fans have to accept that sometimes those seasons happen. Tennessee's not at a point where Alabama and Georgia have been, where they've been landing these top 5 recruiting classes for 5-6 years, and you can go out and just get by on your depth and be elite and beat almost everybody that you play. And Tennessee still might be able to do that outside of maybe Alabama and Georgia. Who knows about this Florida game? I think it's a really tough spot to be in with the culture that you've built, and one bad or wrong decision here that doesn't sit well with the locker room would threaten to kind of tear that all apart. I mean, it's really hard to build a good culture, really easy to tear it apart, and you don't want to let that happen as far as they've come. So I don't envy the position that Josh Heupel's in this weekend. Hopefully Milton just comes out on fire. Everybody looks a lot better after that players only meeting, and we don't have to talk about this again ever again. So that would be nice, but you got to prepare for reality, and who knows what might happen.
This is kind of the most interesting outcome, and I don't think I've really thought about. But Fallout Zone says, I agree with you, Charlie. We won't even know if Joe Milton is the guy if we win. I think you would if he comes out and he's just burning it up. I
like
think obviously
last year.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is this scenario where Joe doesn't have to play that well, and Tennessee still wins. You have weapons in the backfield, and per se maybe you rip off 2-3 really great runs, and then all you have to do is just get the ball into the end zone at that point, into the red zone or something, and then suddenly you're up by 2 touchdowns, and you just end up winning that way. Like that scenario does exist, and maybe we walk away from the Florida game still not knowing if Joe Milton is that guy. Maybe the UTSA game is the week where we flesh it out. But it just it's gonna be really interesting to see. I think. I mean, and Ben says here, why are we even talking about having a leash on someone who's accounted for 7 touchdowns this year and hasn't thrown an interception? So Crompton kind of had a take like this during our postgame show, where he said, if you look at the stats that Joe had in that game and you slap another name on it and you have him play, oh, that's the stat that the kid for Auburn had tonight, you'd go, that's a pretty nice night. 2 touchdowns, 240 or something through the air. But if you're really honest and you watch everything that Joe Milton did in that game, I mean, you really have to take it in. Almost everything came from passes at or even behind the line of scrimmage. They were just screen passes. Very few of those passes were 5 yards or longer even. And there was zero deep shots. This entire season, has there been one, and it was the one to Keaton and he dropped it?
About it. I think it was like a couple of vertical shots in that Virginia game, but nothing really like we saw with Jalen Hyatt last season, or what we can see with Milton's arm.
I don't know what's going on there, and maybe Crompton's suspicions are correct, and he's 100% right there, and they just start bombing it over the top against Florida. I don't know, but
we know he can. I mean, we've seen it plenty from him. We saw it in garbage time last year. We saw it in important games last year against Vanderbilt and Clemson. We've seen him do it. We know he's capable of doing it. So it's just a timing and rhythm thing from that aspect. But it's for me, it's not the deep shots. It's more those passes that you just got to be a little more on target on. And really, honestly, here's where I'm at with Joe Milton. Like fully, I think as a player, he's extremely talented. Obviously, I think he doesn't have the escapability and the pocket awareness of Hendon Hooker. I think Hendon Hooker was elite in that area, and I think Hooker processed things just maybe half a second faster than Milton. And half a second can be a lot in this offense. Half a second is a throw being just a little bit off. And Hooker had throws that were off too. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, he missed plenty of play. I mean, every quarterback does. That's not a slamming Hooker by any means. Every quarterback does. But I think that Hooker just saw everything just a little bit faster than Milton. I mean, and that's fine. I mean, I think Hooker was the better quarterback just from what we've seen so far. I mean, that's not an insult against Joe Milton. You're always going to stack up somewhere, and I just kind of think that's how it falls.
Hooker had a feel and a flow that it doesn't feel like Milton has, or at least we haven't seen him have it yet. At the same time, I remember us having conversations after the Pittsburgh game last year, and you haven't played a team of Pittsburgh's caliber quite yet. Not that Pittsburgh team was amazing. They ended up having a pretty mediocre season last year, but after that Pittsburgh game, I mean, I remember us having conversations being like, Hooker was a little rough, and just not being 100% satisfied and thinking that he was going to be the Heisman level guy that he ended up being. We had similar conversations. They weren't as dire, for sure. Milton has looked worse. He doesn't seem like he has that feel. One of the things that we brought up on that post-game show was that people were scared of Hooker running the ball. And I think they know Milton can run the ball, but they know that he doesn't really want to.
If it's not a designed run, he's usually not taking off.
Exactly. He is not going to be looking for that lane. And this was I think an excellent point that Crompton brought up. I keep referencing him, but he makes great points. But he said that his theory is probably that Milton believes so strongly in his arm that he goes, I don't need to run for it. I can find this tight window and rocket it in there. I'm going to be able to figure it out because I'm so much. I can put so much zip on the ball that I don't need whatever it may be. And I thought that was an interesting point, and maybe
he has
through that lens.
Yeah. He did it against Clemson several times. Very tight windows. I just like the higher percentage play myself.
Exactly. And so he's a different dude altogether, and you can't discount that, and you can't just throw that out and just constantly compare him to Hooker. But we had similar conversations, not ones that aren't as dire, but similar conversations last year before Hooker totally took off. And this was the game where Hooker totally took off, where he played Florida and he beat Florida, and we were like, okay, he's a dude. And we see that now. And so maybe Joe doesn't lose in Florida Milton, as he said before the season.
About that.
Maybe this is the coming out party where he finally shows like, yeah, I'm that guy. Maybe like Cooper coming back is the secret formula. I don't know, because he did play markedly better in that Orange Bowl with Cooper under center. I don't know. Maybe that does make a difference. We'll
and he didn't have Jalen Hyatt or Cedric Tillman in the Orange Bowl either.
Yep. And I mean, and that's why I don't put a ton of validity into that. Like a lot of people have been saying that he just throws too hard and just throws an uncatchable ball. Dude's caught the balls that he threw in that Orange Bowl game. I mean, I don't know. I think they caught 65% of them in the Austin Peay game. And so, I mean, he is, yes, I would guess that it's harder to catch than Hendon Hooker's footballs. In fact, I would guarantee that pretty much. But are they uncatchable? No, they're not uncatchable. If he can be accurate with them. When he's inaccurate, that's a different story. But when he can be accurate with them, they're not uncatchable. He threw a really nice touchdown in this Austin Peay game that was just, he led the receiver just a little bit. He probably could have led him a little bit more, but led Keaton on a crossing route for a touchdown in this game. He can throw that pass just fine, and Keaton caught it just fine. I mean, the dude has that ability. So I don't fully subscribe to that.